Delighted to have Dr. Angela Cortellessa and Mike Araki here. So Angela, take it away.
Thank you, Shrikant. Hi, everybody. In case anyone is attending or watching the replay later who doesn't know who I am, just a quick little introduction. In 2018, I earned my doctoral degree in human and organizational learning from George Washington University, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the lived experiences of modern day polymaths. So what is polymathy? Here's a definition I like to share. It is by Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein. And polymathy is active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations, simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. And I always like to point out that polymathy, being a Renaissance person, it exists on a spectrum. So we're all different in terms of our breadth and our depth in any given thing or any given field. And you don't have to be Leonardo da Vinci to consider yourself a polymath. Today, we're going to be talking about polymathy in academia, what we know about it from a scholarly perspective from the academic literature. And I want to give you, Shrikant covered the timeline, but in case anyone missed it, just real quick. So we're going to talk with, Michael's going to give a presentation and I'm going to probably chime in here and there for about 45 minutes or so, maybe less, maybe more. Then breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. Then when you come back, there's a time for Q&A and sharing your takeaways. And then we'll just do a wrap up. So it should be about 2 hours total. So that's the plan for today. Now, let me share with you guys how I know Michael, who, by the way, is zooming in from Brazil.
Yeah.
So in 2018, when I finished my doctoral dissertation, the process that a doctoral student does is when you finish the dissertation and it's stamp of approval by the university and it's really done, is it's standard to upload it to this database called ProQuest. And I remember sitting at my computer and the relief I felt getting that into ProQuest and really being done with it. And literally within 1 minute of sending it to ProQuest and putting my dissertation out into the world, I emailed it to someone I had never spoken to, but knew very well in a way through his writing. And that was Robert Root Bernstein, whose articles I had referenced heavily in my dissertation. I consider Robert Root Bernstein really one of the most influential scholars in polymathy studies, which is a very, very small field in academia. There's not a whole lot of academics who study this. And I was so pleased when Bob emailed me back. I felt like, to me, he was almost like a celebrity, like a nerdy academic version of like celebrity. And he wrote me back and he was very kind. And he even said he'd read my dissertation, but he also told me about this other person who had written a master's thesis on polymathy. And he gave me his name and email address. And that was Michael Araki. So Michael and I have been in touch as kind of, I joke that Bob is like my scholarly dad, and Michael is like my scholarly brother, because we both have this passion for this topic. We began regular conversations on WhatsApp back in 2018, Michael. We've had so many messages back and forth talking about this subject. We've also presented at several conferences together, and he has a better command of the academic literature on this subject than anyone else I know. And so you're in for a real treat to hear from Michael. So Mike, with that said, I will hand it over to you if you want to introduce yourself a little and then dive into your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Angela. Thank you very much, Shukran, for the invitation. I'm also super glad to be here again. I was here in another presentation last year, and I'm super happy to talk about the research on polymathy studies. And as Angela said, well, in my case, I started researching by myself on polymathy in 2010 when I read about it from Carl Sagan in the book Dragons of Eden. And then this term just clicked in my mind. A lot of things that were loose just suddenly became to hold together. So I think And that's one reason that I try to be very precise and try to put the word of polymathy forward, because I think these words have strength, and it's had for me. And since then, I was the opposite of most academic people. Generally, what's the normal process for you to enter academia? You are a good student, you have good grades, and then you are encouraged to continue studying, and then you study, you have a supervisor in your master's, and then you follow this person's topic, and then you go to the PhD and you follow the topic, and you narrow down your interests, and then you try to look for gaps within that that kind of specialty that you followed by somebody else. Generally, it's like that. For me, it was totally different. I had a totally different career path, and then I discovered polymathy. And then at that time, polymathy was something so difficult to research on. So you didn't have anything. Of course, you had lots of opinions and popular articles in magazines, etc. Things that were insightful, of course, but you didn't have a body of systematic research on that. And that was very frustrating. And it was especially frustrating because I wanted to do my master's on that. And I had to convince a committee of people that are by definition conventional, because they answer to an institution, to a college, which has a disciplinary guideline. So you have to publish in this and this and this and this and these journals. If you don't publish in these journals, it doesn't matter the impact factor. It's out. Okay, it doesn't matter. So it's they have the uh, every department that I know in the world works like this. So I had to convince some people that I wanted to do something different, and that, oh, do you have other resources for that? Other people? Okay, I have this guy, Robert Woodward, thing, and that's basically all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, can I add something in there too? I just wanted like observe that you basically were becoming specialized in being not too specialized. Like that's what being a polymathic scholar means and is, because you're in this academic environment that prizes hyper specialization, and you're studying something that is not hyper specialization. Yeah. So you're kind of against the grain in that system doing that. So maybe that's part of too why there aren't too many scholars doing it in academia, right?
Totally.
Sorry, go on, go ahead.
No, yeah, and that's the part of my political movement now to really push polymathy studies into academia, so into journals, into the mainstream. I want polymathy to go into the mainstream, and I think we have some possible paths. And my first path was in creativity studies, so people in creativity studies are more open, more creative types, and then it was my the first successes that I have. But now I'm in an entrepreneurship department, so I'm pushing polymath in a different field with a different context. But I have a strategy. It's going to become clear, hopefully, during my presentation. And yeah, so at that time, I wrote to Robert Bernstein, but it was 2013. So it was during the process of my master's, of writing my master's, and he was super kind as well, and very important for me as well. Just like I second everything that Angela said. Well, and since then, I continued to expand to understand better this phenomenon. And I think that's Angela touches on a very important thing here, your drive to acquire knowledge. So as I said, and that's not only me that says that, it's the conventional path. So you narrow down first, and then you fish for questions after. And generally polymathic people, they have some kind of a priori drive, or they develop that, and then they perceive that, oh, to answer this question, I have to understand discipline A, B, C, D, subdiscipline A1, A2, A3. So that's the opposite. So I think that's a very important thing, which I called polymathic drive in my master's thesis, and that's something that I'm trying to expand now with a new concept called polymathic orientation, which I can quantify now. And I was late to, not late, but really I was bringing the last results that I had from two studies that I'm sending to publication, one about the scale and another using polymathic testing polymathic skills in the context of the COVID crisis for small business owners that are those people who suffered so much from this crisis. So I think if I could find something to that could be helpful in this situation, that would be good, and hopefully that will be published. All right, so this is kind of my path. So shall we go to the presentation, or yeah? Okay, okay,
Sounds good.
good. Yeah, good. So folks, I prepared a presentation because although sometimes we have the like questions and answers in a different kind of modality here, because I'm gonna talk about a lot of people and there are a lot of concepts. I found it better to have a presentation because it can guide everything that I'm gonna say, and the different strands of research and etc. All right? Okay, good. So let me share. Okay, just give me some feedback that you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, I need just to put you in a smaller box here. Okay, so the topic is going to be the research on polymathy, and research here I understand as systematic studies on polymathy, and I'm going to explain what I think that has been done and the path that it's taking in the future. All right, so what I am aiming to do here, I brought the cover of a famous book by Douglas Hofstadter, this Golden Washer Bach. And why do I bring this cover? It's because as any complex phenomenon, it's very difficult to have one perspective or one essence to it. So what this picture represents is that you have something, some kind of essence, some kind of substance that you can only try to uh, how can I say, to uncover by taking this different perspectives, and then depending on the way you see it, it's gonna have a different outcome for you. For example, at the first wooden thing there could be either a G or an E, and the other thing there would also have the same outcomes. And if you look from a different perspective, it becomes a B, or both of them. So it's just to remind everybody that although science, and we like to use this word for a lot of things, we are in fact using a more systematic approach to understand the phenomenon, but all we can have are different perspectives. And what I try to do here is to bring at least those that are published that I know about, and that can add to our integrated understanding of the phenomenon. All right, so let's go. First, a primer on how we do social science nowadays. Uh, First and foremost, every theory has its boundary conditions, even the theory of gravity. All right, it means that it won't work in every places, in all situations, all time and space. Okay, so when Einstein came with relativity, we discovered that the famous equation that a mass attracts a mass with the inverse relationship squared is not true in all cases, although it works pretty well here on planet Earth and in most of cases. And it's the same in social sciences. So you have to be very careful about which your assumptions are, okay, and how much or how far you are trying to uh, or to what extent you can explain something with your theory, and how in practice we do this thing, how we do science in practice. So in the social science, we have these things called constructs, which are uh, words, which are concepts that are defined in a more precise way. So we call them operational constructs. You can operationalize them. And you can make on the basis of that, you can make some propositions. So my educated guess is, for example, that polymathy as a construct that I define as such and such and such will be correlated with openness to experience, which is such and such and such. But of course, you have to convert it to variables so we can assess it. So I'm mainly talking about quantitative research here. But I have to convert polymathy to something that I can give a grade 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 1 to 10, whatever. And the other concept has to follow the same thing, and then I have to make a hypothesis that is amenable to be falsifiable. Because if I say, oh, polymath is going to be related to openness to experience, and then you find a null result, a non-result. Oh, no, but in this occasion, this person, no, you can't go out using like a tangent every time. You have to commit to some assertion, and if it's false, and it has to be falsifiable. So somebody has to say, okay, we tried this and this didn't work. Okay, so this is the basic thing. Why am I saying this basic thing? Because we didn't have an operational definition of polymathy in most cases. So it wasn't easy to find, like you find for other constructs like personality traits like openness, or even leadership styles, or entrepreneurship. So every researcher has this toolkit of definitions in their field. And then for polymathy, it was very fuzzy, very difficult to find.
Yeah,
And
very understudied.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then nothing was clear. And everybody that tried to study polymathy, they did so in such a way that was not sometimes, how can I say, aligned with others. So there were conflicting definitions. It was not clear. So that was kind of a, sorry to say, a mess. So we had to organize something if we wanted to have like social science done about polymathy studies. Okay, so the path that I tried to take since 2013 during my master was to take this mere word, to make it a construct and to make it a variable. All right, and then of course people tried to do it before me. And how did they try to do? And uh, is it like, does it have face validity? Is it really what we mean to measure? So does it have other kinds of validity? So does it work in the way that we intend to work? Okay, can we measure it consistently and logically? So that was my big question that I'm trying to work on in the last few years. And then, of course, the first thing you do is you go to the definitions of the word. So you take a word that exists in the world. By the way, it was coined by Heraclitus. Americans sometimes say Heraclitus, but I don't think it's the right pronunciation. So, and the guy coined the word to criticize Pythagoras. So it's an interesting story there. And so he took poly, which means many or much, and then he joined with mathy. In fact, in the fragments used, he said, Pythagoras is terrible. He took a lot of things that he heard because he traveled to Egypt and everything. And he was very crazy, Pythagoras. He had a diet, and he had like a whole norm or of how their students should live their lives. So the guy was kind of crazy. And Heraclitus, don't listen to this guy. he just put a lot of learnings together. So it's artful. How can I say? It's an interesting thing that he collect there. But he said, don't follow this. So it's a mixture of learnings, and then mathy in this case meant learnings. However, this word mathy, which is also the same root for mathema, means learning in ancient Greek, but also in many contexts means learning with some assumption of inquiry. And oh, sorry, I did. And for many years, they used polyhistor as a synonym of polymath. And histor, historia in ancient Greek, means exactly inquiry, to inquire things. However, histor became what we know as history because this word also conveys something that you witness and the account of those stories, witnessed stories. So it has a mixture of inquiry and stories that you were there to see them. And very interestingly, so histor became a history, which is totally under the humanities or social sciences, and math became mathematics, which is totally under the exact sciences. And once they were this more or less the same thing. So it's another proof of the cross-disciplinary of polymathy. The word itself gave is associated with two completely separate things as we see today, mathematics and history. And by the way, just became the discipline of mathematics after the Greeks started using the term or tying the term akribeia, which means preciseness. So looking to something very, uh, how can I say, that can be undeniably provable. So this akribeia thing got tied to math and became those things that we know today that we can make those provable proofs, which is what we do with mathematics. Okay, so going back to my strategy there. Although we from the definition of the word, you can get a glimpse that it's not so easy. So polymath is not one thing. And then I made this separation between passive polymathy and creative polymathy. In fact, it was not me, it was Peter Burke that was, as far as I know, the first one to use this differentiation. Why? Because especially in the Renaissance, they used this word a lot to refer to people who gathered a lot of knowledge. So the encyclopedists, so people who studied a lot of things and not necessarily did something or added something new or invaluable to the world. And today, I think we are much more interested in creative polymathy. So in using your breadth, your depth, of knowledge and integrate it or them into novel and useful things. And even in this, we have different ramifications, different types. So Robert Ruth Bernstein and Michelle Ruth Bernstein, they generally use the term avocations, and I generally define them as using avocational polymathy, which is the definition that Angela gave. So when you have an active engagement in avocations and vocation throughout your life, and you can integrate them, mix them. Kaufman and Begero also had their model with different levels of creativity, from little C creativity, the everyday creativity, to big C creativity, super eminent, Leonardo da Vinci, whatever. And in the middle, they advanced this idea of pro C creativity. Wait a minute, being eminent depends on so many things, and sometimes people do wonderful work that doesn't, for some reason, doesn't become eminent. And the opposite is also true. Some people that are eminent today, in 10, 15 years, they will not stand the test of time. And then they will become less eminent. So let's try to see a middle term there. And that's the pro C level of creativity. So being a competent professional that's able to give something new and useful to your profession. So it's a very important type of creativity. And we have polymaths of all types. So people that really achieve the big C, which is the super minority, and that's something that I really don't want the field of polymath studies to focus solely on. I think that's totally wrong because it depends on so many things. Okay, how many people in Africa, how many people in South Asia, how many people in South America have Nobel prizes? That's a very, very small number. Are they less capable? Did they create less meaningful work? Perhaps, but that's totally clear that unless you believe that they are inferior for some reason, unless you believe that, that's totally clear that's an environmental issue to become eminent. Totally clear. And then we have this differentiation that for me is very important because some people are very drawn to acquire knowledge, to consume different things, to understand, but they don't go to this side here of the creativity. And I think that's also very, very important to highlight the experiential polymathy. Because when we talk about knowledge, people naturally tend to think about book knowledge, as I put here in the figure. But it's very important, and that's, let me put here, that once was a constitutional part of polymathy. This is the first study on polymathy in the Western, in the modern Western, not counting the Greeks. So it was in the 1607, I think. This is the second edition here, so it has a wrong date. But this was a guy in Hamburg, Germany today, that wrote this at this time and said, okay, let's try to analyze what polymathia, so still using the kind of the Greek termination, is. So it's a mix of doctrina and scientia. So it's the mix of the study of the written things that are, how can I say, our social knowledge. Okay, this tree here, branch. That's the social knowledge. But scientia here, that's something that you do yourself. So remember the polyhistory, the inquiry, it's this understanding that scientia was at that time. So it means inquisitione, so inquiry, peregritione, traveling, and parata, being prepared to do that. Okay, so you prepare yourself, you enhance yourself through seeing things, okay, oculis, and hearing things. So it once was a constitutional part of polymathy, not only the social book knowledge, which would be more in these categories today. Okay, I just put here, let me go back, some definitions that I brought from different people. I'm not going to dwell on each of them, just for you to take a look on how how differently different researchers or different writers saw polymathy. So some people saw polymathy as acquired expertise and knowledge, which for me is only passive polymathy, okay, mastering 2 or 3 disciplines, for example. Some people thought of polymathy as a universal competence, and universal meant the trivium and quadrivium that I showed in the last picture, which were how the disciplines were organized at the time of Johannes Wolver, the author of that first study. Okay, so knowing everything, which is not really everything, it's just the social knowledge of that time for some social class. It didn't include crafts, for example. It didn't include knowing how to fish. for example, which is super useful knowledge, but for some reason wasn't included. And then you have multiple levels of creative polymathy, okay, making a contribution, original, useful. And then you have the avocational polymathy, which is the definition that Angela brought from Robert and Michelle Ruth-Bernstein. And you also have some kind of antecedent polymathy, some kind of potentiality there. Okay, so people not necessarily that have achieved, but they have something inside them that's polymathic. So, and this idea of having something inside you that propels, that drives you toward polymathy, I put in the category of trait polymathy, and that's what I'm trying to to advance. In the end, I abandoned the idea of trait because it gives too much the idea of something that you're born with and is stable. And now I'm using the idea of a polymathic orientation, which you gradually build throughout your life. So my definition today of polymathy is a lifelong relationship with knowledge in which a person seeks intimacy with it in terms of depth, breadth, and integration. And let's break this definition into parts here. By knowledge, I mean not only book knowledge. So mainly entails the inquiry, that thing that was the source of the word polyhister, which for some reason got abandoned in the in the in the usage. But through inquiry, or better, you can do inquiry through many forms. So experiences, travels, so the peregrinazione and the scientia for over skills, thinking tools, new mindsets. So everything builds up your knowledge. Angela, yeah.
Can I just say, I love that you're including not just like book knowledge, because that really, so many times when people talk about polymathy, they just think of it in terms of like books, book knowledge and book smarts, and knowledge and what we know is so much more than just that. So I love that you included
Yeah,
experience and travel and skills and all that stuff.
I really don't like this narrow view of knowledge. And so it's everything that you acquire and that you can use to improve your life, to solve problems, to be a better person, to achieve more substance, as the Humboldt brothers would say in the past. Another keyword is intimacy. So for me, this polymath is like a relationship. So you achieve closeness, okay? But not only that, you bring it to your own self. So your inmost, deepest self is gonna uh, want and is gonna seek this intimacy with this how can I say, more broad understanding of knowledge. And then you have the qualifiers. You must attain breadth, okay? Because if you have this intimacy and this desire for only one narrow discipline, it's not going to be polymathy, all right? So at least wide-ranging knowledge, some fields, okay? And preferably disparate domains, so different things like sports, arts, sciences. Depth, of course, I know that intimacy also or already has this depth meaning, but I want to highlight this is very important. And I think in today's society, we have to stress that because people are sometimes losing this perhaps respect for depth or this seeing depth as something that it's good for them. I think we're losing some of it, and it's very important because without that, you don't have the intimacy we are talking about. Okay, and by the way, let me go back to the word intimacy. And we think about relationship, but one very interesting example of intimacy is when you watch a video of Maradona, you know, the soccer player. He died very recently, but just watch this guy in his warm up with the ball. what you see is total intimacy with soccer, with the soccer ball. And we used to say that in Brazil. So if you want to play better, you have to acquire intimacy with the ball. And so just to make clear that when I think about polymathy here, we are thinking of enhancing life. So life is not only book knowledge. Okay. Of course, Maradona is not the best case. He was very much into sports, and then very much took how can I say, very hedonistic life. So not into other types of knowledges, perhaps other experiences, yes, but not the uh, some intimacy with other things that would make him a more polymathic person. That perhaps could have helped him. But in any case, the last element besides depth and breadth is integration, and it's also in the Robert and Michel's definition when they say that it's important to mix vocations and avocations, right? To you know to do something with their lives, and it's also in the Humboldt brothers understanding of polymathy that also entailed what they called a very animated interplay with the world. So in integration, I mean, uh, personally, you have lots of knowledge that the world separates into disciplines. So it's one of our jobs. It's to integrate them with one another and with what you're doing in your life. A good example of that is Richard Feynman. Um, when he was asked, what tip would you give somebody if they want to become a genius? He said, have 12 problems in your mind. And every time you see something new, you learn something new. Just pit this new thing against all of your 12 problems, and something will hit much more frequently. And even though he was known uh, only in the domain of physics, he had a more polymathic posture, at least uh, to life and possibly to physics. He liked to learn. He became a good drawer, and he liked music as well. And so when he was talking about this, he was talking about this integration happening in at the idea level, so at the knowledge level, right? And we also have the integration happening at your personality level. So I have those many interests. How can I show myself to society? What do I say when people ask me, what do you do? So the more integrated you are, the easier it becomes to answer this question in a way that brings things together. Although it's in this case, it's not necessary for you to have that, because mostly you are explaining what you do to society. And remember, um, for the polymathic person, disciplines don't really make sense. It's just knowledge. It's just a journey into more knowledge that explains more things. So the people who separated knowledge into disciplines were the specialists. And for mostly, in my opinion, for reasons of power. Because if you separate some part of knowledge and you claim that territory as yours, it's easier for you to defend it, to earn better money, to get money for your department and not another department, etc., etc., etc. It has a lot of advantages, uh, referring to more power, but it doesn't mean that it's good for efficacy in thinking. All right. Okay. And then with these three things, we have a differentiation between the polymathy and, for example, the dilettante who lacks depth, the specialist who lacks breadth, and the passive polymath or the encyclopedist who lacks integration. Okay, and although we can more or less be clear on the elements that make up polymathy, we also have to be clear that it will involve a lot of things, as I said. So ability, personality, how creative you can be, and your values. So what propels you to do things. So I came with a model first in 2018 to try to put these things together. So, for example, we have some outcomes, self-actualization, social impact. You have some antecedents, ability, traits, and in the middle, you have your stock of knowledge, as I have defined in broader terms. Okay, now let's go to the cream of the of the science here. So after this primer and this understanding this journey of polymathic studies, what people have actually done and published. Okay, so first person, Robert Ruth Bernstein and colleagues. The at the time, it was 1995. I didn't see anything in creativity studies. I saw people researching polymaths, okay, studying the life of people, like biographies, a lot, you have them, and something in the history field, like Peter Burke, that studies polymathy through a historical perspective. And then this study came correlating the avocations, the thinking style, and working habits of professionals and scientists. And it was very interesting that they found that, contrary to the common, how can I say, myth that being specialist is good for you, is gonna take you further in your career, for those people at the very top of creativity, it was the opposite. They were much more polymathic, it meaning they had much broader, much more different avocations, and they took it seriously much more than those people who were less successful. So if you want to become a normal person in the field, okay, be a specialist. But if you want to achieve top creativity, it may not be the best strategy. Moreover, they studied, they interviewed these people. So like Nobel Prizes versus people who are in the social, in the science academy versus people who are in professional uh, groups just. And it was remarkable to find that those people who were more conventional creators thought like that. Oh, I can't take too many avocations because it's gonna reduce my time and it's gonna be bad for my career. And for the very creative people, it was the opposite. So no, it's totally important for me. If I don't do that, I can't relax. So if I have a difficult problem, I just, for example, Einstein, I go to my violin, or Nabokov. When I'm catching butterflies and study them, it's when I can develop the ideas of my book. So these top creators really seemed to think differently and more polymathically. Uh, so Robert, Michel, and another group had a very recent article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a very top journal. And they used what I'm also calling avocational polymathy. So how people that create patents differ in terms of avocations. So they are doing a lot of studies following up on this idea of avocational polymathy and tools for thinking. So one important point of Robert and Michelle and colleagues is that we don't think in the language that we use as our outcome. We think pre-verbally, we think in sensations, in intuitions, and then we translate our thinking to the disciplinary standards, equations, stories, poems, etc. They generally start and are developed intuitively. It's a very important point. And this intuition is totally cross disciplinary. In fact, disciplinarity doesn't make sense for this pre-verbal inner thinking. And another study of Robert and Michelle was about the different types of polymathy throughout their lives. So not only look at the cross-section of the individual. So how do we have polymaths with different trajectories? Yes, we do. So some people, they are like monomaths, this type 1, just one thing. Some people start broad and then just focus on another thing. That's what society mostly pushes people to do. Some people remain super broad, but it runs the risk of dilettancy. Some people start it. That's not so rare. For it may be interesting, but for those people, what's the name, that have a talent at a very young age, the spring prodigies. Yes, prodigies. It's very interesting to find that a lot of prodigies, when they come to their maturity age, they just, I want to do more in life. So the prodigy strategy mostly fails. So be careful. And they have this type 5 and type 6, which would be the sequential polymath and the person with breadth and more sequential polymathy as well. Another strand of studies refer to this historiometric, mainly chiefed by Dean Keith Simonton, so one of the most important people to study geniuses. And he had this PhD student that was interested in the versatility of geniuses. And they found that a significant amount of their genius sample was versatile. And it included, for example, the domain of music, where most people are not so versatile. Generally, music, for some reason, has less versatile geniuses. But in any case, almost 40% of them were versatile. And then they develop a scale. So this is about dead people, okay? So geniuses that were, how can I say, recognizably eminent. And then they created this scale that they gave points on the versatility of people. And they were trying to find if there were some other personality traits that could help explain or that were correlated with this versatility in the geniuses. And just keep note of this point study, openness and topical diversity correlation, because after that I made myself a study, right? But in any case, those two measures were not super correlated, one type of diversity and versatility, but they did indicate something here. We had another study on personality, and at the time, 2006, there was a very heated debate on whether creativity was domain specific or domain general. And Ivichevich and Meyers studied different types of creativity: conventional creativity, everyday creative individuals, artists, scholars, and they found they weren't looking for that, but it emerged from the data that some people were Renaissance individuals, polymaths. So they had this kind of cross-domain creativity. After that, we had the study of Siriraman. It was also a phenomenological study, so qualitative. He got people that were trained to be math teachers, and he gave a problem to them and asked them to express how they approached the problem. And some people have had more polymathic traits in approaching the problem. So he also draws on the work of Ruth Bernstein's. So thinking in analogy, which is integration in my vocabulary, epistemological awareness means having some idea that something can be outside of my domain of knowledge. So more broad interests, shifts in perspective, in my opinion, different manifestations of depth, breadth, and integration. And he found these differences as well. And finally, that's the path I'm taking now. I think the field needs a psychometric scale of polymathy. Okay, so what's a psychometric scale? In contrast with a historiometric scale that the guy needs to die for you to be able to gauge the level of polymathy, here we assume that polymathy is something that can be a drive inside the person. So the person, soccer here in Brazil. So the person can have inside in their innermost self a desire to progressively be more intimate with knowledge in terms of breadth, depth, and integration. And my scale has these three dimensions, and it worked fine. And more importantly, I need this concurrent validation. Okay, my scale works psychometrically. I mean, the factors work. So breadth means really breadth, and depth another thing, and integration is another thing. But does it work in comparison with other things in the world? So I came to another researcher, Irina Trofimova. She is in the McMaster University in Canada, and she has this great model of human behavior, of individual differences in human behavior. And in contrast with the Big Five model of personality, which is the most common and based on, how can I say, a questionnaire of adjectives. So, are you, how can I say, mostly happy? So, do you worry a lot? So, this is the Big Five. So, based on a list of words, how do you describe yourself, or how do you describe people? And this is from the neuroscience and other experimental research. So, just being a little bit shorter here. Most importantly, they have this column, this row here, which talks about the things that are more complex in life, the problems that we need to stop and think to solve. And these two rows here talk about things that are more deterministic, that you don't need to invent every time to to construct your behavior. So every time you run the same way. Every time you speak the same way. Even though you invent the sentences, you don't invent their structure, their words, and you also have similar sentences to be based upon. So these three things, probabilistic processing, plasticity, and mental endurance, would be connected to polymathic drive. And the last row talks about the emotional aspects. And the most important of them is neuroticism, which is fear of the unknown, or a more, how can I say, you have your neuroscience here gives a more negative feedback to you when you face uncertainty, when you face novelty, okay? And it can overwhelm you, and then you learn to avoid this type of things. So polymathic people, they are kind of daredevils, especially creative polymaths. So they can't have that. And some satisfaction, I mean, this is some sense of self-approval, because you have to go against a disciplinary stream, and you have to be sure about about yourself. So you have a mix of emotional and cortical traits. Let me go to the findings here. These are the three cortical traits, okay? Those are the ability to sustain attention, the ability of plasticity to integrate new actions when provided with new context, and the ability to think in probabilistic terms, meaning to get pieces of reality and build like theories in your mind. Okay, how things work. So, how things work in this column, how plastic you are in your thought, and how can you sustain attention. And those three are related to polymathy, but to different aspects of polymathy. So this is the composite scale, which is the average of the three. But let's take a look. Sustained attention is important for depth, but not as much for breadth. These are two different studies. Sorry. Another thing we do, we try to replicate, we don't try to replicate, sorry, but we do studies with different cohorts of people to see if the results are consistent. Okay, so I'm bringing those two studies here. These people here are younger people, and these people here are older people for some reason. These are professionals and these are students. And you can see some difference here as expected. So for breadth, how can I say, the ability to sustain attention is not so important. For depth, plasticity is not so important. But for full polymathy, it is. Okay? And then you have this generativity, which is kind of the integration thing here. And remarkably, I had the same results. I did it again to see if I made some mistake, but it was very remarkable that I got the same correlations. And again, neuroticism had a negative impact, let's say, on neuroticism. We have some support for the ability to have self, confidence against the difficulties of life, and we also had some, especially in the second study, some correlation with sensation seeking, and my hypothesis is that in the scale of sensation seeking, there is also novelty seeking inside. So the drive to seek novelty. So it's a little bit of a confounding effect here. And you would expect, of course, a polymathic person to seek novelty just because it gives a good feeling for us. But it's not the dilettante, the person who seeks novelty after novelty and never gets intimacy. So this is some empirical support that for polymathy, you need the three things together. If not, you get a dilettante or a specialist, or if you don't have generativity, a guy, a person with only book knowledge or encyclopedism. All right? And then just to show that it was confirmed, neuroticism also confirmed, and some confirmation for sensation seeking. I'm not going to go very super into that, but it's a very interesting model. And I have a whole video talking with Irina Trofimova about that. And it also goes in line with some findings about neuroscience that have nothing to do with polymathy. They weren't looking at polymathy, but they were looking at how the prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain work for highly creative people. And highly creative people seem to recruit more the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with these three traits here. And finally, as I told you in the beginning, I'm now in an entrepreneurship department. So I did two studies. First one to correlate polymathic orientation and entrepreneurship, and these are the results. So for general entrepreneurial behavior, there is a correlation between my scale of polymathy, the general scale, and being entrepreneurial. Most importantly, for entrepreneurs, people who are in a company, but they seek to bring new business within a company, or they are in the business of reinventing the business within the company. It didn't work for self-employed people, which is expected because self-employed people means a lot of people, like doctors who are super specialists, but they are not within a clinic, or lawyers and all kinds of people. So there was no relationship. But I think that more interestingly is my model here with small business owners, and how this is self-efficacy, and how the COVID crisis affect their self-efficacy. So the first, like this relationship, the basic relationship is the following: the more that the more your business suffers, the worse you're going to feel, and the more you're going to lose your confidence, right? Because of the crisis. And then you may even not go on as an entrepreneur and quit this idea altogether. And then I asked, was there anything that could mitigate this problem? And let's go first. Or is there anything that makes this problem worse? And first of all, neuroticism makes this problem worse. So for people who are natural worriers or more anxious, so that have trait neuroticism, it became worse. So the problem of COVID crisis made their feel even worse than if they didn't have this trait. But for the people who had polymathic skills in this study, I gauged skills, not their orientation. I wanted to know if they really did different things, okay? And for those people, having a wider range of skills did mitigate the effect, did make them keep their idea that they could be effective, that they could be self-efficacious, even in the time of crisis. And this is something that is a new study, and it can be an interesting path, not only in creativity studies, so in other fields, in this case, entrepreneurship research. And this is what I have for now. I think I used all my time, right?
What time is it? It is. We've been going for
No problem.
about an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
But this is it. This is the end of my presentation. So I talked about how difficult it is to transfer an idea, a word, a concept, and make it amenable to scientific research. I talked about how different people did that, okay, and the different perspectives that we have on polymathy, and mainly Ruth Bernstein and Simonton and Sri Raman and Ivichevich, and of course Angela. I didn't bring your work here, but you should be there with the first work, the first phenomenological work on the lived experiences of modern polymathic people that are there living and doing things today. And I think we have good prospects of research to all of these paths. And, and I really expect that now with a scale of a polymathic orientation scale, it will, open a boom. So a lot of research can be done. We don't know anything. So now we can know the correlation between a polymathic based construct and everything that we know in science, in psychology, in creativity, in business, and other fields. So that's the message I would like to end with. And of course, if there are some people interested in research here, you're most welcome to collaborate on this. We have lots of things going on here, interesting things. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for that presentation about what we know in academia. And so much has been done by you. I mean, Michael, guys, really is an expert on this topic. And I think will probably be spending the rest of his life, like me, researching and promoting this. So thank you so much, Mike. Shrikant, did you want to say anything before we go to breakout rooms? And guys, when you're in the breakout rooms, you can talk about what you've heard, think of questions you might want to ask when we come back together. But
oh no,
go
I
ahead,
have a
Shrikant.
lot of things to say. I really like what Michael is doing. I would love to talk more, but what I want to do is I want to give everybody the same priority. So I would recommend if you don't have any more questions, I would go to the breakout rooms now, let people talk about the ideas that have been presented, and then they will come back, they will give their takeaways and ask the questions to Michael, and I will give my takeaways and questions at that time as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm
Sounds
gonna leave
good.
for 1 minute, okay? And then
Go
I'll
ahead.
back. All right, thank you.
Give me just a second. I'm going to start up the breakout rooms. Barry.
Okay, I just hit the wrong button, but my takeaway is we just had a really nice discussion with Jennifer, Chris, and Kimberly, and I've been reading a lot of books about what are the traits that distinguish a polymath from a monomath or just an average person, and I'm getting to and listening to Michael, he kind of confirms that, and obrigado, Michael, and yeah, I've been to Portugal. It's not the same thing as in Brazil, but it's very similar, Portuguese. And anyway, I'm finding out that polymaths tend to be able to think both intuitively and experientially, and as well as logically and rationally, and they can switch from back and forth almost immediately depending on the situation. And I do this with other people that are not this way, and it really confuses them. And when they want to control me or manipulate me, they get really frustrated because I can relate to some experience or some movie or some book, or and I can just jump all over the place, and but it's still on topic. Okay, so I've created this. I'm working on this. I'll leave this one thought that my next painting and poem is this, my doing the down dog in a wave, and basically it leaves the concept that if you go with your creative flow, the wave will take you where you want to go.
Very nice, Barry. So Angela or Mike, you can respond to each. Anyone, just unmute yourself and start speaking.
Just to confirm, what you said is one of the items of the polymathic orientation scale, the ability to switch back and forth between different modes of thinking. So it's into the scale, this trait.
Angela, do you have a comment?
No, just thank
Okay.
you, Barry. That was beautiful.
Thanks. All right, Barry, I want to say, I mean, we've studied Carl Jung's psychological functions, and most people are kind of using a limited set, being able to use, both T and F and both S and N as and when you need to use, and have the freedom to actually do that whenever you need to do that. I think it's a great point. Thank you. Next up is going to be, let me see here. Judy, followed by Kevin. Judy.
I just wanted to thank my group. I thought it was very interesting to hear other people's experience of being polymathic. I did have a question. Any advice on how to be less of a dilettante? Am I muted?
No, you got the question through. It's such a good question that everybody paused for a second before answering it. So be patient. Answers coming your way in 1, 2, 3, go.
Michael, do you want to go first, or?
No, you go first.
Well, I was going to say, Michael even said on one of your slides, Michael, it said a dilettante lacks depth, like they have a lot of breadth. So if you want to be less of a dilettante, I would say seek more depth. Go a bit deeper when you're exploring something that you're curious about. And that may feel like discipline. It's hard if you're polymathic and you're curious about lots of things. It can take some discipline to stick to things, and to finish. That's one of the challenges of being this way. But, you know, there are some benefits to sticking with things sometimes too, even if it feels like it's work sometimes. Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah, one thing that I didn't explore here that's very important is the distinction between the knowledge and the field. The field are the people who are working with those set of facts, methods, etc., etc., etc. You have to seek people uh, in that field. So when you enter a field, you are, you know, you are carried by the wave. But the thing is, be careful not, you know, to be carried over by that wave. Retain your own self, retain your own polymathy, your own vision. Disagree with them, but if you want more depth, you should join some people who are working on that, a field. So I think that's
Yeah.
What I would recommend is that, you know, you really need to find something that you're really passionate about, so you find it's worthwhile putting as many cycles on it as possible. So then you can go deep into it, because you don't have to go deep everywhere. But if you can go deep on something, it actually enables you to leverage all the breadth that you have achieved on that one point. But that point has to be something that you are passionate enough about, that you think it is worthwhile to do that.
That's a good point, Shrikant. I wouldn't force yourself to go deep on something if you hate it. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Go, you know, follow your passions and your curiosity. And if you do that, then it shouldn't be so hard to go deep there, right? Like, because it's interesting to you. So
Thanks.
follow your passion.
The thing is, I would do. You have to bother. In research, we have that. If you have a question, you have to bother about it enough, so you will want to, you know, to go into the details. If not, you're not gonna bother enough. You're gonna stay in a more superficial level. But yeah, I, of course, what Shrikant said, I think it's the first. It's your motivation, but assuming motivation and desire, I think we are also very, how can I say, gregarious people. So join a group of people that are doing that thing. I think it really helps.
I'll add just one more thing. It's a question of difference between active and passive. There is, most dilettantes are like almost watching TV. They're just getting hit by different things which are producing emotion in them. So it's a very passive way of operating. When you're trying to build something yourself, something that you love building, then you are active and you're bringing in everything. And that allows you to go in depth because you are building something, not just taking in something. Next up is going to be Kevin and Chris. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Mako and Angela. If one word to describe my takeaway, it is integration. Polymath logic could be vertical integration or lateral integration with a positive way. If you don't integrate it yourself, they can use the slowly passive accept it. Learning is not just the survival, it's also to have fun. That's a bit of polymath, I would say. I'm going to share two examples from 52 Ideas meetup from yesterday. One is about house device. Actually, Srinka asked the presenter. He said high quality relationship with home and work is the key for house. It's applied to everyone. I like this one. And the second was about the loop about snowmobile. That's a great example of integration. From different way they put a snowmobile. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. I just want to talk about that snowmobile. It was the most amazing, presentation that we have had here. This was a presentation by on the ideas of John Boyd, the OODA loop of how do you deal with fast changing situations. And the person who worked with John Boyd for 20 years and has given that presentation to the Marines for the past 25 years, dozens of times, came and gave us the same presentation of how do you operate. So it is a deepest workshop that we have done, interactive workshop that we've done. So it's on the 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel. I've just published it, so you're welcome to look at it. It's profound. The title is called Evolutionary Epistemology. That how do you make sure that your ideas evolve to shape and be shaped by the changing context around you. Next up is Chris.
Well, I just have to say again, Shrikant, always have the best guest. Angela, really appreciate all of it. You know, I learned a lot from Dr. Catalesa, and I learned a lot from Dr. Araki in this situation. And I heard a lot of people bring up integration. And I think that is the most important aspect, right? It's one thing to learn in an academic environment. And one of the things that's most impressive about Dr. Araki's career is his focus on entrepreneurship. That is a prime example of a field, an industry that requires some of the most polymathic skills out there. It's not meant for everyone. It's hyper stressful. The stability and some of the things we all yearn for do not exist. But the one integration I think that's often overlooked, that's a challenge for polymaths, is the integration with other human beings. Because you see, it's one thing to be able to find yourself as a creative sitting in a room of all mathematicians and find success formulaically. But then to get them to buy in that your opinion matters at the same level is a challenge. So the polymaths out there that tend to learn from politics, learn about humanity as a focus. What I like about Dr. Catalesa's background is in leadership. And that skill set right there has helped her unite so many polymaths in the polymath place. And Kane, as a leader in the group as well, having to deal with in the field. I don't have a degree. I have 0 degrees. I have all the credits, but I have 0 degrees. And I'm a leader in my field globally. And it's because of my ability to understand humans and politics. And I think it's crucial that you draw attention to it. I love the breakdown that you have, Dr. Araki. And I think the more focus on integration is going to help polymaths come out of their shell and make practical outcomes that matter. So I appreciate, thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I agree completely.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, that's a very important challenge for, I think, all the creative types or most of the creative types. It's a challenge, and it's very important. Going back to the idea of how to get depth. So, and what I said, join a field. So it's very important to join forces. So every polymath is different, but with different polymaths, we can have this different strengths being channeled to make a practical, implications to society. I think that's super important now at this point.
And I'll add, in my qualitative study of the lived experiences of modern day polymaths, something I heard over and over again from all of them was about the social and emotional challenges of living as a polymath in the age of specialization, where if you express the full capacities that you have, you may be seen as lying or exaggerating or boasting or just something negative. And so it can feel like a lonely journey because you're having to hide sometimes parts of yourself, and it doesn't always feel safe to reveal the fullness of who you are. And we don't talk about polymathy either. I mean, it's a word most people don't know, and in general, it doesn't come up as a topic of discussion, which is part of why, after hearing those sorts of things from the people I interviewed, it's why I realized, we need a place for people to be able to talk about their polymathy. It's why there's a Facebook group called Polymath Place. It's why there's a YouTube channel I made called Polymath Place with over 50 videos on it. I know Michael feels the same way. Like, we need to talk about this more. We need people to say the word, use the word, right, Mike? Yeah, he's nodding. Yeah, because absolutely. I mean, like you said, Chris, the integration of subjects, to be able to get innovation is one thing, but literal integrating with other people to collaborate and to share experiences is also really important. So if you want to integrate with other polymaths, come to Polymath's Place on Facebook.
Can I just say one thing to Angela's point, and I think this is prolific. I think the most of the polymaths I've ever worked with have been quantitative thinkers, right? They've expressed outcomes in a quantitative world in a tremendous ways. You talk to them, their dissertations are done in a quantitative capacity. And I think that the mark of a real polymath that'll change the world, the Da Vinci's of the world, are the ones that understand the importance of qualitative outcomes just as much as they understand the importance of quantitative outcomes. Because with qualitative outcomes and quantitative outcomes together, you have what moves humanity. And that has not been seen very often. I'm more of a qualitative outcome type person. The world that I work in is purely quantitative and in terms of numbers. And it's interesting because in marketing and stuff like this, it's really about the bottom line. But what I love about what's going on in society with all the social movements, it paints qualitative outcomes as something that matters as well. So there's never been a time where polymathy is more needed and more important than right now, but also with a pathway to actually do something with it.
Thank you, Chris.
Fantastic, Chris. All right. So if anybody has any more comments or questions, Laura, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
That's the quote of 2020 and 2021. You
Yes,
need to
that's-
unmute yourself. That
Right,
is, if there was.
that's well, probably the truest thing we should say. No,
How many times have we said that?
overgeneralize, But I've been around a lot of math department people and physics people and chemistry people over the years, and I don't mean to say anything against them, but they are probably the least socially capable people I've ever met. They are really like in their own world, in their own domain, and they're they just don't have that quality, you know. They live in their world, you know. They don't come out of it. They're not even social among themselves particularly. But really they don't do well in public, I have to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, but so you do have some, you know, something's got to help those folks in that area.
Let me have Mike or Angela respond to that. Mike or Angela, any comments?
I don't really have a comment. I hear
Okay,
you.
sure.
I hear you, Laura.
Okay. So let me follow up on that. Mike, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Go first.
I mean, this is a very large issue, and I want to ask Chris about this as well. I think there are kind of different, what shall I say, kind of different traditions that develop in a society. So there is the entire quantitative tradition, math tradition, where mathematicians, many people in software, many people in physics, chemistry, they have that, and they have an understanding of science, and they're very, very good at it. But they have not really focused on developing the human angle. I mean, the point that Chris talked about is a very large point, because actually what the way it happens in real world is that there are other people who understand science and the quant enough, at the same time have enough people skills to somehow manage to get these people to talk to each other well. Okay, so there is that skill of being kind of spanning those two worlds. Human beings are very different than the physical world, and the kind of skill set that you need to develop in order to deal with human beings is different. And some people do not take the effort to actually develop that skill set. It's enormously powerful. And the point that Chris was making about qualitative versus quantitative, now I'm a very big fan of quantifying things, but if quantifying is kind of almost like a final step. Many times you kind of have to do with qualitative work first to figure out what you need to quantify. And as far as our knowledge of human beings go, large part of it is qualitative, if at all, if you can put it into words. I mean, that's a good progress. So I hear what Chris is saying, and I agree with it, that you need to develop kind of these qualitative abilities, and most of the human abilities are qualitative abilities. Quantitative abilities are critical. The modern world we have is based on that. You really need to master that. Unfortunately, people who have qualitative abilities refuse to do that, refuse to be good at quant. So that's what I was thinking about qualitative. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, it's just, yeah. But I think in a complex society as ours, it's like there are roles for everyone, and it's good. For them, it's like some societies allow it for people to. It's for me, it's a privilege, but not all privileges are good or lead you to enhance yourself. But some people just live with the privilege of, oh, I don't need anyone, even though of course they do. The money comes from some place. But anyway, in a complex society, I'm okay, but of course that's not the thing that should be encouraged to everybody.
I'll add too, in the study I did, I looked for people who had expertise in both the arts and the sciences. And I know those categories, like we made them up, and one could argue that it's arbitrary, making these different categorizations. But the one thing I'll say about, quantitative versus qualitative, art, science, like those sort of different fields is if you're polymathic person and you have one foot or one hand in both, it's almost as if you have to speak a different language in each world, and you have to be almost a different version of yourself in those worlds. And like there are different value sets in those different worlds. And that can be difficult to navigate, having to become a different version of yourself, depending on if you're in a quantitative, like scientific-y kind of group of people, or a more, human focused, qualitative, soft, fuzzy sort of environment. But I think there's advantages to being able to have your foot in both of those worlds and to operate. Is it helpful if people operate fully in one of quantitative or qualitative, art, science, whatever? Yeah, we need both. We need people we need all kinds, right? And I think the bottom line is for you to know what kind you are and to not force yourself to be something you're not,
All right. So as there are no this one, let me go ahead and ask some questions to Mike. Is it okay if I talk to Mike for some time, Angela?
Absolutely. Go for it.
All right, Mike. So this is very excited because I'm glad that there aren't that many questions. So I get to ask you questions. Usually I give preference to everybody else's questions, so I don't get to talk to folks much. So Mike, the thing that remains with me from your last presentation is the identification of the breadth, depth, and integration. I think that's the most powerful integration that the kind of including all those three things, I think has been huge. And of that, the integration is a really, I think, kind of the linchpin, to kind of bring everything together, because otherwise the depth and breadth is kind of mechanical. It's easy to kind of measure that. So can you speak a little bit more about integration? How, like, for example, let's talk about, don't talk about your research, talk about yourself. What do you do with integration? How do you build your integration?
Okay, just one thing, the symbol that I use for polymathy now, it's the infinity sign, and integration is in the middle, is the linchpin, and I have that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I changed. I used to use a triangle, but it was even a colleague from Brazil that said, don't use the triangle, use something different. And we came up with this idea of using the infinite sign, and the integration is the linchpin. And I think, yeah, it is kind of a, when I was thinking about that, I always felt that depth and breadth, I don't like dichotomies. First of all, one thing that some polymathic people have is that they are able to have different ideas in their minds at the same time. And I think it's about different perspectives. And integration was always a key issue. In my life, I had the very same problem that Angela described. So being a different person in different environments, it was bad. And especially during your formative years when you're a teenager and you know who I am. And that's so bad. And integration was kind of a illumination for me. After Polymathy was the first. It was like I was reading that book and, oh my God, this is it. So it
for other folks, could you repeat what you mean by integration?
What I mean, yeah. But for me, integration has several layers. So one level of integration is at the ideational integration. So ideas bringing together and having new ideas. So colliding. You have personality integration, which is so how I can uh, put all my interests in a synergistic network of enterprises using groupers terms. So at the personality level. So how can Michael arise from those, you know, uh, different facets? So I think it's a pursuit to leave the personas and find your true self. Okay. And you have, of course, the ultimate level of integration. That's the self with the world. So I just put a quote from Wilhelm Humboldt that he talks about this very animated interplay with society. That's the ultimate level of integration. So if you stop to think, of course, it's so good when you have different knowledge coming into your mind and then new things come and then things make sense. It's very good. Uh, but when you don't have the integration, the personality level, something is lacking. And then you can build your, now I feel good talking, okay, I have polymathic interests. I have some work in economics, some work in psychology, and I feel good about myself. There is a lack of a lack of discomfort about that. So you seek. I I like this negative thing.
Yes.
So you seek to remove this discomfort. All right. And now what I'm doing, as you asked about Michael, what I'm doing, I'm trying to find this integration with the larger society, mainly through my research, which I think it's a great comparative advantage that I have. I like that. I'm good at making theory. I like to read. I like to go deep into, reading a history book, a guy writing in Greek, and then I make calculations in in my doctoral dissertation. I like to do that, and but what I'm trying to do now is, being able to leave this mark, which are, as you said, things that come from you to the world. So it's a cycle, right? So you get pieces from the world, and then it all happens here. Everything that has ever been done happened inside one of these boxes, right?
Mhm.
And then the other part of the cycle is what you put through. And for that, I recognize I lack, for example, the marketing skills, the publicity skills to make an even greater impact on another level of society. I think I have what it gets at the
Mhm.
academic level. Now, it took me, I don't know, 6 years to feel this way. But if you stop to think, its integration is the not only the linchpin, but the like the train that carries the
Yes.
your
Yes.
life. So
No,
that's my personal view.
yeah, absolutely. It's a profound idea. I mean, the way in which, for example, one of my favorite thinkers is Louis Sullivan. He's an architect who is the father of the skyscraper. He's father of the modern architecture. So his idea, he says his autobiography is called Autobiography of an Idea. So for him, the idea is the integration. So his idea means he's looked at everything that the world has to offer, taken all of that in, and it's formed an integration, which is like his putting together of everything that he knows. And then all his ideas, all his life is kind of comes from that. Now it's a very lofty ideal because it encompasses everything that you have, everything that you have taken in, and it is the core of what you have to offer to the world. And then so it's like a funnel, it brings everything together and everything goes out from that. So it's so very much. So I'm going to do a whole series on kind of developing that idea. The
Going,
other, go ahead.
going to the example of the math people that are so, into themselves, I think a great challenge is to communicate all of this richness that we have in our minds. So think about that. you have all this richness coming into in these transformations, and you have, the products are formed first in like those very shapeless, intuitions, and then you have to shape it into symbols that people understand, and then you have to convey that, because even if you put that into symbols that people understand, it's not how they read or how they listen to your message. So it's really, really challenging. And some people just give it up about this part. Okay, I won't communicate anything else besides those things that I can in my field or with my little group. And
Right. And it goes both ways. I mean, it's like, just like people who have human skills find it difficult to communicate it to people who know math have people who know math have a very great difficulty communicating it out. I've done a meetup on Bayes rule, a Bayesian thinking of, kind of holding open the possibilities that you can be wrong. And how do you do that? So kind of understanding it at both mathematical level, but kind of in an intuitive level where you can actually keep applying it to your life, to kind of keep updating your beliefs as the data comes in. So how do you do that? So it's like you kind of have to, but in order to, the beauty of it though is that when you actually sit down to communicate ideas, you have to put them in an objective form, and the process of doing that itself actually teaches you something, because you're trying to make it objectively understood by that other person. So it's an effort well worth taking. Angela.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to the time. So I wanted to ask one kind of wrap up question of Michael, which is, Michael has such command over the literature, over what we know about in the field of polymathy studies, and he's contributed quite a bit to the field himself. And so I guess I just want to ask you, Mike, like, what do you wish for the future of polymathy studies? Like, what do you wish happens, or is there one study you just wish, happens because we really need it, or just in general, what comes up for you when I ask, what do you wish for the future of our field?
Mainstream.
Good answer.
Yeah, in one word, mainstream recognition. I think the way I see it in the in the psychology field, probably through creativity studies, but to be used in entrepreneurship and then management. I'm trying to find the path of least resistance into fields simultaneously. That's what I am doing. But I hope other people do it in other fields as well. And then with time, it's going to become more mainstream. Of course, it's still part of some other fields. I don't think it's going to be different in academia, but perhaps in the future you can have you can say in your department that I'm doing this kind of research.
Yeah. Yeah, not be a black sheep or something, or alienate yourself.
Yeah.
Being a rebel studying polymathy and in the world of academic silos and hyper specialization. Yeah. All right,
folks. So Mike and Angela, thank you very much. This has been delightful, and this is great, and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, Angela. And folks, rest of the folks, we have one more meetup coming up at 5 o'clock. It's on the ideas of Julian Jaynes. He's one of the deepest thinkers that I know. What he talks about is consciousness. He talks about, at a very primitive level, we are stimulus response machines. We take in stuff and we react. Rising above it consists of actually creating a mental space, an imaginary mental space in you, where you take in the emotions, the memories, the external feedback that you're getting, and manipulate images. Think of yourself as an analog eye, this little character, saying, what would happen if I did this versus that? And playing out possibilities and choosing an action. That is what reasoning is about. That is what consciousness, it's about self-consciousness. And Brian McVeigh is a student of Julian Jaynes. He's written about 16 books on this topic. He'll be here, and he's now working on how do you use this as a technology? How do you use this to transform your life? How do you gain a distance from whatever it is that you may be in middle of? How do we use, so it's a way of, he's saying, he's kind of trying to convert the insights of Julian Jaynes about use of these, what he calls conscious interiority, as a tool for transforming your life. He's already, there is a book that is being published. He's already sent it to the publishers, but he's giving us a preview of that book. So today we will be exploring the ideas of meditation, hypnosis, and unusual phenomena like hallucinations and dreams and all of those things, and seeing how do you actually use them in your life, what they are, understanding of what they are, and how do you use them in your life. So that's at 5 o'clock. All right, folks. So thank you very much.
It's so interesting, Shrikant. And I'll just say, I don't know, Michael, if you have anything else to say as a wrap up, but thank you so much, my scholarly brother, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Very good, folks. So I'm going to close this meetup for a few minutes so I can load up the videos faster. And then I'll open this up at 5 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.